Alright, this is Brandon Jones. I'm going to show you how to make a wooden fingerboard. Your materials you're going to need are some veneer, some wood glue, your mold, some clamps or vise, a pair of scissors and a razor blade, a tech deck, just a deck, a pencil, pen, something to work with. You're going to need a tape measure, ruler, caliper, something to measure with. You're going to need a drill press, either one will work. You're going to need 2 drill bits, one 1/16 of an inch, one 1/8 of an inch. You're going to need some sandpaper, 2 different pieces, one rough, one finer. Tech deck base plate off of a truck. Some clear coat, spray or brush on, either one will work. Now if you're making a graphic deck, you're going to need a couple more things. You're going to need some wax paper or paper towel. Wax paper works better. Some double-sided tape or stickers, either one will work. You're going to need a computer with a printer. And these last couple things here are recommended. You don't have to use them, but I recommend them, and they do work better since I have them. A power sander and a disc sander. You'll see why these, I use these. They make things a lot easier in the end. Alright, the first thing you want to do is cut your veneer into plies. It's pretty simple, but there's a few things you want to take in consideration before cutting. First thing you want to take in consideration is cross-plying. I do recommend cross-plying if at all possible. What cross-plying actually is when the wood grain is running in one direction on one ply and then is running in the opposite direction on the next ply, and then it repeats this throughout the deck. Okay, the next thing you want to take in consideration is how many plies you're actually going to cut, and this is all determined by the thickness of your veneer. I'm using Rockler veneer, so I'm going to cut 5 plies, but if you're using thicker veneer than this, you may have to use a less amount. The last thing you want to take in consideration is whether you're going to make a graphic deck or not. Why this matters is because your bottom ply is going to have to be cut so the wood grain is going from side to side. You'll see why later. Alright, I'm going to show how to make a graphic deck. So what I'm actually going to do out of this maple is I'm going to cut 2 plies with the wood grain running from end to end, and then 1 with it running from side to side. Then out of my walnut veneer, I'm going to cut 1 ply with it running from with the wood grain running from side to side, and 1 with it running from length to length. This is how I do graphic decks. If you're gonna just make a blank deck or a color deck, just cut 3 plies out of whatever wood you have with the grain running length to length, and then out of your other veneer, or if you're using the same veneer, it doesn't matter, cut 2 plies or however many plies you have with it running from side to side. Alright, now once you get your plies cut, if you're making a graphic deck, you're going to need to take your bottom ply and you're going to want to sand it so it's smooth, like so. And if you're just going to make a regular deck and not do a graphic, you can just skip this. Alright, to print the graphic, it's pretty simple. First thing you're going to want to do is print the graphic onto a piece of paper. So open Photoshop or Paint, whatever, doesn't matter, just to print the graphic. Find the desired graphic, whatever one you choose. Just print it. I prefer to print it, like, I'll show you here in just a second. I prefer to print it, if you can, print it where it's in the top left hand corner of the piece of paper, like so. And just print that onto the paper. Okay, once you have the graphic printed on your piece of paper, what I like to do is take a pen and mark the outside edges of the graphic at the top and bottom and across the nose and tail. You'll see why I do this in a moment. Okay, now we're gonna print the graphic onto our ply. To do so, we're just gonna tape our ply directly over the graphic we just printed on the paper. And why we did the lines before is so when we put the ply over the graphic, it shows exactly where the edge is, so we can line it up correctly. To tape it to the piece of paper, use double-sided tape or stickers and tape it on. If you're wondering why we cut the ply from side to side, with the wood grain going from side to side, it's because whenever the ply goes through the rollers on the printer, it doesn't get stuck. Once you have the ply taped to your piece of paper, reload the piece of paper as if you're gonna reprint the graphic in the exact same spot. If you're using Photoshop, I learned this from Mike Schneider. A good tip to do is go to Filter, Sharpen, and then Sharpen, and this will sharpen the edges along your graphic. Now just go back and reprint your graphic. Now I just hope it doesn't get stuck. Success. Alright, next thing we need to do is get ready to put our board in the mold. So we need to apply glue to in between every one of our plies and then put it in the mold. So with your wood glue, squeeze a small amount onto your plies, like so. And you can use a brush or whatever. I just use my finger, and you just spread out the glue evenly across every one of the plies. If you noticed, I laid these out accordingly so it'd be cross-plied. It's easier to do that way. All you need to do is just stack them on top of each other. One thing I've learned that makes things easier is once you glue them, they'll get wet, sort of wet, and they'll want to bend. An easy thing to do is take your mold and just lay it on top, and it'll keep it from warping. Okay, once you have all your glue spread and your plies stacked together, you're going to need to put it in the mold now. Try to line up all of the plies evenly across at least one side. It doesn't matter about the other side because you always sand that off later. Okay, now to put it in the mold, take a piece of wax paper or a paper towel about the size of your mold, lay it on the bottom half, take your plies, lay it on your mold, put it on the top, and try to line up the mold where the edge of the mold is straight with the edge of your board. Once you have everything lined up good, simply take your clamps and clamp your mold tight. Do not over tighten it. If you over tighten it, what can happen is it can leave mold marks. What mold marks are actually creases from the edges of the mold, and sometimes if the deck isn't wide enough, Like if the mold is not as wide as your final deck will be, you'll have little creases along all the edges. So if you over tighten it, you'll have those creases. Just so tighten it where it's tight